him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed on by the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The lawyer said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." The Gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I know every day, Lord, you anoint Steve for the ministry that he and Laura and others do and we pray that you bless him and your Holy Spirit be with him and move through him and move through us as he speaks to us in your name. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Pronger, as you can see. And it looks like I've kept my beard a little tighter to my face than the individual in that picture. But that's really why I'm here to talk to you about, why does that individual, or why is that individual in that situation? But before I start, I'd just like to say to everyone here, this is somewhat of a homecoming for me. Many years ago, my father's in his 80s now, he was an altar boy in this very church. He grew up at 49 Flora Street, just the house next to Arthur Bowden High School. My grandfather, Rev'd, for a long, long time was the bartender or barkeep or the manager of the old Empire Hotel. And so I myself attended Arthur Bowden High School, and over the years spent many years running around in this neighborhood. And so I'm very happy to be back, and I'd like to thank John, of course, and Canon Janet for inviting me to speak to you this morning. I spoke to a smaller group for about 10 minutes, an hour or so ago, so I'm a bit warmed up. But the reason I'm here is to introduce myself as one of your new neighbors. And what do we mean by that? Well, again, my name is Steve Pronger, and I am from the Psychiatric Survivors Network of Elgin. Now, we often don't refer to ourselves as that. That's a lot to say off the tip of the tongue. It's a mouthful. It doesn't roll easy. So we call ourselves the PSNE, Psychiatric Survivors Network of Elgin. And for the longest time, we have been down at 499 Talbot Street, across from Holy Angels Church, right next to Crazy Joe's Gym. But now, as of April 1st, we are just behind you here. And if you went out the front door of the church this morning when you left and you turned around, you would see the yellow word that said Midtown Tavern. Well, the Midtown Tavern is no longer, I'm happy to report, the Midtown Tavern. It is now the new 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week drop-in center for the PSNE that's open to the public. And so our drop-in center is now what used to be the old bar on the first floor. So a bit more about myself before I get into this. I have had the privilege of writing a couple books. My first book was called Your Brain is Out to Screw You, The Men's Guide to Doing the Next Right Thing. Now, a lot of our female members in the congregation this morning may really appreciate that someone out there wrote a book and called it The Men's Guide to Doing the Next Right Thing. And actually, I found out through my publisher that I have a lot more female readership than male readership. My recent book, and this is more along the lines of where we're going to get this morning, was entitled, This is What's Wrong with Them. And I call that the answer to the world's most often asked question, which I believe is we all want to know at some point in our life or in what is wrong with them? What's wrong with that person? Haven't you all thought about that at some time in your life about anything? Right? Your neighbor, your children, the bank, the groceries. What's wrong with them? So I've taken it upon myself to answer that question. And part of that question is what we're going to get into this morning in this discussion about homelessness and poverty. Because the answer to that question affects us all. Why? Whether you're an individual in poverty or you're homelessness, you've experienced homelessness, the answer is the same. Those of us, most of us, seem to show the most amount of character or positive character when we have control over our environment. Wouldn't you agree with that? But what happens when we lose control over our environment? All the answers to that question is what finds people in poverty or experiencing homelessness doing the things that makes all of us say, why are they doing that? Or what's happening to them that makes them do that? Okay? The answer is one answer. So the Psychiatric Survivors Network, we're behind you now. We're your new neighbors. We're thrilled to be there. And we hope at some point over the next week or month, you'd all come into 701 Talbot Street and walk through and say hello. Hi, Steve. Hi, Lori. Talk to us and get to know the place and some of the individuals we're helping. There you will find a small food bank. We have a modest food bank. We're not trying to compete with the Caring Cupboard, which is just up the road a little bit. But we found that our food bank serves people when the Caring Cupboard is not open. Okay, because let's face it, people get hungry and they experience, I don't have enough food or food insecurity at all times of the day, the night, the weekend, the year, and we want to be there to serve them. In fact, not too long ago, we had a single mother. She's working, a couple kids. She's working for minimum wage. We would call her, she's the working poor, as many of you would have heard that before. She came in to us on a Friday night and needed food for her children for the weekend. The Caring Cupboard was closed. She didn't have enough money to buy groceries for the weekend. We were able to help her out. Okay, so that's one of the things we do at the Psychiatric Survivors Network. She did not have mental health. Despite our name, we are available in the city of St. Thomas to help everybody. Joe Public, as I say, the general population. Anybody in St. Thomas and Elgin County. The other thing we have is a clothing bank. Now you may think, well, why do we keep clothing? Well, again, those who are homeless, those on the street experiencing poverty, many of them do not have the capacity to do laundry, or they just simply can't afford to do laundry. They don't know how to do it, or they don't have the money to do it. Whatever it is what it is. So we will give people new clothing as much as we can, because quite frankly, they're going to take it off, we're going to put it in the garbage bag, and we're throwing it away. Because it's not going to become clean. It just won't happen. So we appreciate that situation, and we're there to help people with that. The Psychiatric Survivors Network was primarily set up to help individuals and serve individuals that had issues stemming from mental health. That's our primary foundational reason for being open. But it's grown to be much more. Social anxiety is increasing, and I say stemming from too much internet use, quite frankly. That's what I personally feel, but that's another subject. But whoever you are, whatever your situation is, if you are experiencing an issue with mental health, we invite them to come in, present themselves, and we'll start the process of trying to help you overcome and deal with that situation. We specialize in what's called warm or soft peer support. If someone comes in and they need to see Canadian mental health because they're in crisis, or so often we say fire, flood, or blood, then we're going to call the police, or we're going to send you to crisis, and so on. We're going to get you to the hospital if that's where you truly need to go. But the reason we receive our funding is because the Ministry of Health wants to keep individuals out of the healthcare system and out of the hospitals, using up big resources and big dollars, so they provide us with a stream of money to try to work with people, peer support, lived experience, helping lived experience, so individuals may not have to access health care. That's the primary reason we exist. The other thing that we're very happy about is that we now are assisting people with homelessness. And that finds ourselves at our new place. We believe at the PSNE in what's called a housing first philosophy. Now, if you don't know what that means, I'll explain it to you in very simple terms. If you and I were standing at Tim Hortons and you were behind me, or I was ahead of you, and you said, "Hey, Steve, what's housing first mean?" And I only had a few seconds, I would say to you it means road to room. Road to room. Okay. We want to have the opportunity to take someone who's on the street, who's homeless, on the road, and put them in a private, safe space. Okay, so when we think about this morning's theme, the Gospel of Luke and the Good Samaritan, we've heard it a number of times, haven't we? And there are even other major religions who have similar stories or parables as part of their theology and their teaching. It's a universal story. But the reality is it still applies today. And it's a universal reality because any one of us can do it. If Canon Janet got up in front of you and the last thing she said to you today was, "You know what? This is it. This is our last service. We're shutting the church down. We're all done. God said to me, we're done. Closing the doors, emptying the pews, lights out, that's it." What would you do? What would you do with all the stuff you've heard all over the earth? If God changed the plan, we're no longer coming to church on Sunday, what would you do? That's why the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan, is so important in our lives. And we take it very seriously at the PSNE. So when we say road to room, it's the opportunity to do just what that innkeeper and just what that Samaritan were doing. And any one of us can do it. If I can maybe stop for a second, I'd like to ask the congregation a few questions, if I could. And feel free to speak out. I think the way we treat homelessness up to this point is not as good as it could. Not as good as it could be. And let me ask a couple of questions. When you're thirsty, you want a drink of water, what do? Get a drink of water. Okay, if you're hungry and you want some food, what do? Get some food. Okay, so if you're sick or you've hurt yourself, if you're sick or you've hurt yourself and you need medical care, what do? Go to the doctor, go to the hospital. So when someone's homeless, what do?
Ignore them.
Do we give them a home? Why not?
Fear.
Oh, that could have been better. Who said fear? Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to get to that in a second. So the question is, why don't we give them a home? Why not? Right. And so I'm going to go right towards the comment of fear. But the reality is, sometimes we give them a cot in the gym, or sometimes if it's warm enough, we give them a sleeping bank. Oh, they can go sleep in a tent, or they'll figure it out. And so the question becomes, why not? Why do we treat perhaps food, medicine, water, but when it comes to homelessness? There are reasons for that. I'm sure a number of you, and this is a whole other discussion, believe there's government waste or misspending, perhaps. But the reason we don't do it is because of fear. Now, I said to you a few moments ago, I written a book called This Is What's Wrong with Them.
I don't know if it's fear, because myself, I hear about people sleeping under bridges and
If Janet gave me 2 hours today, I could tell you all of that. Okay, and I can say, just go back to our Gospel of Luke. Just...
But they're kind of unknown.
Right.
So how do you find them? I guess it's to agencies like yours.
Yeah, so if some of you see me running around the streets, in the summer I wear a red pair of running shoes, don't be afraid. Hey Steve, just wave at me, how you doing? And you may see me sitting in a park bench somewhere or sitting with an individual. Don't hesitate to come over and say hello. We're interested in significant relationships. But here's the key, and I'll answer that question. This is what's wrong with them, applies to us, or whether someone's in poverty and experiencing an issue with homelessness. Here's the key. We all have an afraid brain. Doesn't matter who you are, your station in life, your place in life, you have an afraid brain. Get used to it. Your brain is afraid. Psychologically speaking, it is innate to us, evolutionary. It is a matter that years and years ago, we were hardwired with this afraid brain because it kept us alive. It made sure we found food, adequate clothing. It kept us from being eaten, to run away, and so on. But now when we bring that brain to the modern day society, and all of the things we had to worry about, clothing, food, shelter, provided to us by technology and modernism, our afraid brain worries about all kinds of other things. Ooh. You know, I can go to the grocery store to get food, so my mind wanders. We have an afraid brain. So how does this apply to what we're saying? So what I want to talk to you now is about the psychology of poverty, a few aspects of the psychology of poverty. If you've ever wondered, why does an individual, why does he have that cigarette? Why is he smoking a cigarette when he doesn't have any money for food? Or how did that guy afford to get a beer? Or how in the world does that guy have 2 dogs on a leash when he can't even have a home? I want to help this congregation, anybody, understand why that happens. And then what we can do about it. So first of all, I said everyone has a frayed brain. Okay, so there's certain things. I'm going to ask the congregation a little bit of a joke. It's a small riddle. If you know it, don't just blurt it out. But I want to try to prove something here. So you ready for this? I was up all night coming up with this one. I wish I had a drum roll. What is red and smells like green paint? What is red and smells like green paint? So if you don't know the answer to this little riddle, or you found yourself going, okay, what you had just then was the afraid brain. Your brain was afraid. By the way, the answer to that little riddle is red paint. What's red and smells like green paint? Red paint. Right? Okay? But if you did not know the answer, or even if you thought, even if you had it right, you thought, I better not say, that's what happens to those who are homeless or who are experiencing poverty. If you were in that moment, for that brief moment, and you were like, that's what happens on the streets to our most vulnerable people. It can happen to anybody. And that's why decisions are made by individuals in poverty that you may not understand. Okay, oh, look at this. Boy, see what happens when you get a good joke?
Time drop.
That's usually the one my wife gives.
No.
Thank you. And Janet, please watch my time. Okay, or John, please, don't, if the shepherds came. That's why the priest and the Levite, by the way, whatever it was, they left the man on the side of the road. Okay? They have an afraid brain too. Now the Samaritan overcame his afraid brain for whatever reason is. But what I'm asking all of you is to understand the concept called the tyranny of the moment. So when I asked you to answer that little riddle, and you couldn't do it, your brain engaged in what's called the tyranny of the moment. Oh, that's what happens to an individual in poverty all the time. When that young lady who came to our food bank realized it was Friday night, she didn't have enough food for her kids, guess what happened? She fell into the tyranny of the moment. What am I going to do? Okay. We exist at the Psychiatric Survivors Network of Elgin to try to eliminate those kind of moments. The other part of the psychology of poverty is something called the inability to delay gratification. Okay? You all have that too. On Friday night when I'm tired and I want a pizza and some comfort food, and I say to Susan, hey, why don't we go out and get a pizza somewhere? And she looks at me and said, you don't need a pizza, but I want a pizza. Okay, the inability to delay gratification. Those who are most vulnerable suffer from that a lot. And again, the afraid brain. The other thing, and again, something we all have, is what's called the compulsion to secure being. Every one of us have this thing called an ego, and it wants to be healthy. In fact, it wants to be more than healthy. It wants to protect us. It wants to comfort us. And the reason it does that, or the way it does that, is to latch on to things. I feel good now. So whether it's you, perhaps one of the reasons you come to church is your ego wants that healthy feeling from coming to church. So an individual who is homeless and has 2 dogs, his ego is wanting to identify with something. The compulsion to secure being. I have to be something. Even though I'm homeless, I have nothing. I'm in poverty. I'm searching for something. It may be a cigarette, it may be a beer. It may be, unfortunately, a drug addiction of something. The good news is, and I'm saying all this to help us become more and more compassionate when we look at people in poverty, we look at people who are suffering from all these type of ailments that keep them on the street, is that we become compassionate. Because the same thing that they suffer from is the same thing that we suffer from. It is the human condition, and whether you're in here or out there, we all have it. So the next time that we see somebody who and we wonder, why is that individual doing this? Or why is he or she partaking in this? Or why is their circumstance like that? That is why. The tyranny of the moment, the inability to delay gratification, the compulsion to secure being, it's all there, and it's all in us. So that being said, any one of us have the capability of being the Good Samaritan. Any one of us. Because we all share the same mind as the fellow laying along the side of the road. But some people stop and some people don't. Why not? Why don't we stop? A number of years ago, 2 Princeton psychologists did a study, and it was called the Good Samaritan study. And so they got a group of budding theologians and seminarians together, and they're going to give them a test to find out, what prevents people from helping other people? Or why will some people stop and some people don't? So they took all these studying theologians and they put them in a room and they had them fill out a questionnaire. Half of them filled out a questionnaire that just general stuff of why are you in the ministry? Why are you studying theology? What is it? How will it benefit you in the human condition? The other half studied the gospel of the Good Samaritan. Then they told these individuals after that they're going to fill out a questionnaire of why they are entering the ministry or why they are studying theology. And then there was one more variable. They took an actor from the theater studies program and they dressed him down. The picture is very fitting, actually. And they put him on the steps of the building across the way. And he slumped over like that. And so they told the theologians, oh, by the way, after filling out the questionnaire and reading the parable of the Good Samaritan, you're going to go across the courtyard of the school, the campus, and you're going to go into the building across the way and you're going to give a talk. You're going to give an impromptu talk. There's people over there waiting for you. You're going to go over there and get a talk. And then they put this man in. The final thing was the testers told half the group that you had a few minutes, you weren't rushed, you had some time to get over there. And they told the other half of the group, oh, you're late. You don't have much time. Oh, I'm sorry, they're all waiting for you to get over there. Well, it's interesting what was found. So after all of that, the people who they were told they had plenty of time to do their work and get over there and make the talk, 63% of those individuals actually stopped, not all of them, 63% of those theologians stopped and offered assistance to the individual. Only 63%. Out of the group that were told, you're late, you better get going, get over there, they're waiting for you, amazingly, only 10% stopped and offered assistance. So what we find about poverty and homelessness, and even sometimes our spirituality, what the determined factor was, the psychologist running the study said, it's not what's in their heart, it's not what they read about moments ago, it's not what they had to go and talk about at the next lecture hall. The determining factor, whether they stopped and assisted that individual, was the amount of time they had. That was it. Thanks. Okay? And that's good. So I have 5 the amount of time I have. So what's preventing you from helping or assisting those with poverty, homelessness, and so on? Studies have shown that for most people, it's the time you have. It's not what's in your heart. It's about our day-to-day lives. The priest and the Levite walking down the road in Luke's Gospel. Why didn't they stop? Could they have been busy? Could the Samaritan have more time on his hands? Who knows? But the point is still made. That sometimes the afraid brain tells us, I don't have enough time. I don't have circumstance. I don't have time to stop. What our brain do?
I think the big reason is discomfort and selfishness.
Yes.
And I think we're as hardwired for that as we are for fear.
Right. It's my privilege to be here today, and actually I just have one more thing to say, and I'm going to wrap up my talk. And I'm so privileged to be here. I know many of you, and John and Janet for inviting me. It's awesome. A great congregation. I felt the Spirit here when the first song, and I thought, wow, this is what church should be. That's what I thought. But when I said to you, the things about the afraid brain and what prevents us from assisting or understanding those in poverty, and what we're trying to do now as your new neighbor behind you, it reminds me of a really ancient thing. It does have to do with time, but we have ownership of time. And if I could just indulge you with an ancient story, it's not a very long one, in conclusion. There's a small village on the mountainside, and up at the top of the mountain, there was an old man, an old sage, an old wise man. And many of the young people in the village were becoming tired of this old man always getting it right. It seemed he had all the answers to the questions. So 2 of the younger boys thought they would trap a bird, trap a bird, and they're going to trick the old wise man. And so they did just that. They found a bird, they got it, they put it in a cage, and they carried it up to the mountain, and they came in front of the wise man. They took it out of the cage, and they thought, boy, you know what? If we're going to ask the wise man, if this bird dead or is it alive? If the wise man said the bird is dead, then we're going to throw it and fly, and he'll be wrong. If you said the bird's alive, we're going to crush it in our hands, and still the wise man would be wrong. We got him. We're going to get that old wise man. So that's what they did. They got it there, took it out of the cage. They went in front of the wise man. Had the bird like this between one of their hands, and they said, old man, you think you're so wise. Is this bird dead or alive? And here's the point of everything I said today. The old man just calmly looked at the boys and he said, "My sons, this is in your hands." And so likewise, poverty, homelessness, whatever we feel in our heart, it is in our hands. It's all in our hands, and how we reach out, what we do with all this. Thank you for having me this morning. Please come and see us at our new location. It's right behind you. And, we feel the love and the great partnership of St. John's Anglican Church. And thank you for your friendship.